Aurelia is too simple to know when she's losing, Thorne said. The words hit me like cold water. My hand froze on the counter. My heart felt small, like it was folding into itself. The old wall clock behind him went tick, 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 and each sound felt like it was counting my heartbreak. I am Aurelia, a quiet storm wrapped in grace, gentle on the surface, but carrying a depth of strength that only those who truly look can see. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and tell me where you're watching from in the comment section. I was wiping the kitchen counter when I heard Thorne's voice floating from the living room. He did not know I was back early from the store. His cousin, Brannock, was with him. They were laughing. I slowed my steps when I heard my name. How could a professed Christian be saying this about his wife? And to his younger cousin for that matter. Was he not teaching the young, unmarried man that it was okay to treat one's wife like that? Thorne was gradually letting go of his Christian values. The changes had progressed for some time now. I had tried to let him see these changes so that he would guard against them, but all my warnings had fallen on deaf ears. I stepped back before they saw me. My throat burned. I heard them change the topic, but the words stayed stuck inside me. I whispered, "Lord, help me," though I did not even know what I needed help for. Maybe strength, maybe courage, maybe a sign that I wasn't losing, even if Thorne thought I was. I carried the sound of that laugh and that cruel sentence all day long. At work, I smiled at customers, but my eyes stung. When I went into the bathroom, I locked the door and let one tear fall. Just one. I didn't want people asking questions. It was not the first time he cruelly joked about me, but this time it felt different. It felt like something inside me cracked, like a shell breaking. I wondered if he saw me as nothing. I wondered if I had been loving him with both hands while he held me with only 2 fingers. Didn't the Bible command men to love their wives as Christ loves the church? I have kept my own commandment as wife, to submit to my husband. Why wasn't he seeing this? The wall clock sound followed me in my mind. Like it was asking how long I would ignore the pain. I washed my face and whispered Jeremiah 29 verse 11 to myself. For I know the plans I have for you. If God had plans, maybe my life was not as small as Thorne said. At dinner, Thorne acted normal. He passed me the salt. He talked about football and he laughed at a joke on TV. Brannock had left earlier, but the sound of their earlier laughter still rang in my head. I didn't find the joke on TV funny, but I tried not to ignore Thorne. If I didn't ask him why he had said what he said about me to his cousin, I could begin to keep record of wrongs, so I decided to ask. "Dear," I began, as I always call him, "I didn't let my hurt take the best of me. I heard you tell your cousin that I'm too simple to know when I'm losing," I continued. "What am I losing and how simple do you think I am?" He was shocked at my question, but it only left him defensive. "You heard wrongly, and whatever you heard did not refer to you," he jolted. I was shocked to my bones. I did not expect the man I had married to tell a lie right to my face. Things might be worse than I had thought. The wall clock went tick, 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 matching the slow beat of my chest. I wanted to ask him other questions. I wanted to ask why he had to lie to cover up, rather than apologize, but I was scared of the answer. I pushed my food around the plate. He didn't notice I barely ate. He didn't show any remorse. It felt like we were sitting at the same table but living in different worlds. I had begged for months that we see a marriage counselor, even if it is our pastor. My husband did not believe in that. To him our marriage was better than many others. I had always told him that other marriages should not be our yardstick. We should rather weigh ourselves on the scale of God's word. Are we loving each other as we ought to, as Christ loves the church? Is our love for each other unconditional as recorded in the first book of Paul to the Corinthians? All my questions had fallen on deaf ears. When he reached for the remote, I whispered, "Good night," and went to bed early. I stared at the ceiling, hearing the clock from the living room. That sound felt like a lonely echo. I said my prayers and went to bed. I was cleaning the top shelf in the bedroom closet when I noticed something strange. The brown envelope that held our house papers was gone. Checked again. I checked under the clothes. I checked behind the boxes. Nothing. My heart raced. I walked to Thorn, who was tying his shoes. "Where are the house papers?" I asked. He did not even look up. "Why are you checking things you don't understand?" he said. The tick, tick, tick from the hallway clock turned sharp in my ears. I felt a pressure in my chest like a storm cloud forming. I wanted to ask again, but his face was closed. Hard. Like a locked door. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I went to see my father, Elder Rowan. He sat on the porch with his old cane resting beside him. When I told him the papers were gone, his eyes narrowed. "Aurelia," he said in his slow, gentle voice, "love does not hide papers." I looked down at my hands. "Maybe he moved them," I said. I have always been good at making excuses for my husband. I didn't want to believe that he could ever do anything to harm me. I fear God and would never intentionally hurt anyone. I believed so about him too. My father shook his head. "A man who hides things is planning things." Dad is full of wisdom, and many of his words usually came to pass. His words made my stomach twist. I didn't want to believe him. I wanted my marriage to be safe. I wanted the home I worked so hard to build to stay mine. But the tick, tick, tick of his porch clock made me feel like time was pushing me toward a truth I didn't want. At work I lost focus. My hands trembled when I typed. When customers asked questions, I had to blink away tears that came out of nowhere. At church my voice shook when I tried to pray. I felt lost, like I was walking through fog. My best friend Isolde touched my arm and said, "You're disappearing, Aurelia." And she was right. I felt small, like the world was folding in on me. Even at night I lay awake listening to the clock. Tick, 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 like it was counting down to something I couldn't see. I whispered Jeremiah 29 verse 11 again. It was the only thing that gave me a tiny spark of hope. But what plans does God have for me? There was no answer to that question. All I had to do was have faith and trust Him for the process. This was not easy, but I believed that His grace will help pull me through. One night, Thorn came to bed and turned his back to me. He didn't say good night. He didn't touch me. His silence was cold, like a wall of ice. What is happening to us? The question raced on in my mind. A home that was built on God's love was now falling apart. I felt my hands losing the grip of my home. Felt helpless. I turned the other way too and whispered some prayers. "God help me" was all I kept repeating. I stared at the shadows on the ceiling. The clock from the hallway echoed through the house. I felt like I was sinking. I wanted to reach for Him, but I didn't want to feel rejected again. I whispered, "Lord, I don't understand what is happening." My voice shook. I held my Bible against my chest. It was the only warm thing in that cold room. I remembered our wedding day. The bright flowers. My white dress. Thorn's strong hands holding mine. He looked at me with soft eyes and said, "I will protect you." Now he seemed far away from that man. His voice was sharp. His smile was small. His heart felt closed. I wondered if he still loved me, or if I was living with a stranger. The clock kept ticking, steady and slow, like it was reminding me how much had changed. I tried to talk to him after dinner. I stood in front of the TV and said, "Thorn, I feel like something is wrong. Talk to me." He raised his voice. "You are lucky I keep this house running. Stop acting like you know everything." My soul shrank. I felt like someone had stomped on my heart. I understood the dangers of not communicating in a marriage. Assumptions can keep building, dividing walls can keep growing higher, and everything can be lost. The clock ticked faster in my ears. I walked away before I cried. I came home from work and found strangers walking through the house, touching walls, measuring rooms, opening closets. Thorn stood with a man in a suit. He didn't look at me. "Aurelia," he said calmly, "I sold the house. We have to leave in 2 weeks." This sounded very wrong. How come I was hearing this for the very first time, and in front of total strangers? The same ones who wanted to buy the house. My knees almost gave way. I held the wall to stay standing. What had I done to deserve this? Was this His way of saying He was no longer interested in the marriage? Was there someone else in his life? My questions were within me and left unanswered. The clock behind me went tick, 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 each sound hitting like a hammer. I felt my world fall apart in 1 second. When the buyers left, the house felt cold and hollow. I stood in the hallway where the sound of the clock echoed loudly. Tick, tick, tick. I whispered, "God, help me." My voice cracked. I felt like I had lost everything, my home, my safety, my trust. I leaned against the wall and let tears fall. I didn't try to hold them back. I didn't scream. I didn't fight him. I went into the bedroom, closed the door and prayed. Lord, show me what to do. I needed God more than ever before. My world was falling in. God is my only anchor. I held on to him like never before. And in a still small voice, I heard him speak to me. Call a lawyer. Then I called a lawyer from church, Mr. Varon. I told him everything. He said, "Your name is on the deed. The sale is legal, but your signature is needed for the handover. He cannot force the move-out date without your agreement." Calm strength filled me. I didn't feel small anymore. There was something I could do. I was no longer helpless. God truly answers prayers and makes a way where there is no way. The clock's tick, tick, tick felt softer, like it was on my side now. At breakfast I said, "I will meet the buyers myself. I have rights too." Thorn laughed. "You don't know what you're doing." But I wasn't joking. Contrary to what he said, I knew what I was doing. At least a lawyer had let me know my right. Something in me had changed. I was no longer scared of the clock or Thorn's voice. I had to do what I had to do. I was ready to stand. I met the buyers alone at the small office near town. I wore my blue dress and held my chin high. I showed them my ID to prove who I am. They had no doubts about that. They had met me at the house the other day. I said politely, "By law, I can take up to 2 months to vacate. I will need that time." They agreed without argument. We shook hands and I went back home happier than ever. Thorn was shocked when I told him. His face tightened. He shouted angrily at me, but surprisingly, I wasn't moved. I quickly entered the room to avoid further provocation. His plan was slipping out of his hands. For the first time, the tick, tick, tick of the clock felt like a victory. I started saving everything, every coin, every bonus, every gift. I put it all in a small metal lockbox under my side of the bed. Thorn didn't notice. He was too angry that the move-out was delayed. He stayed calm, prayed, worked, planned. The clock ticked beside me every night, steady and strong. Felt like it was cheering me on. I joined a women's business class at church. The teacher, Miss Erwin, explained budgeting, real estate basics, and how to start a small company with faith and wisdom. Every lesson felt like a piece of my strength coming back. I probably was the most serious student in class. I didn't have the luxury of time. I needed this class so much, my life and existence depended on it. I held on to Jeremiah 29 verse 11. I wrote it on the first page of my notebook. I began to see a future beyond the house Thorn sold. After all, God is the maker of all men. He could still do unimaginable things for me if only I could trust him. My mind was open. I learnt all I could in a very short time. Thorn began calling me cold. He asked why I was distant. He said I was not obeying him like before. But really, he was scared. He realized he could not push me around the same way anymore. I was more focused and hardworking. I had become more confident, and he seemed not to like that. He watched me grow quiet, calm, and steady. It unsettled him. He couldn't place his hands on what I was up to. I became busier with my classes and my work. Apart from that, the only things I did were to study my Bible, go to church regularly, and pray. Even the clock sounded different to him now, or so it seemed. He looked at it sometimes like it blamed him. One night, Thorn whispered, "I sold the house because I felt like a failure beside you." I hadn't asked him any question and wondered why he decided to tell me. Perhaps God was gradually unraveling the plans he has for me. Thorn's voice was small. I saw fear in his eyes. He had finally decided to speak with me. Scared of being deceived again, I didn't allow his words to get too much to me. It almost sounded like the man I married, the one who once held my hands and promised protection, the one who had promised to love me come what may. But pain stood between us now. He took me to a restaurant. I went with him without any hesitation. After all, he married me. The light was soft. The tablecloth was white. I wore a simple green dress. Thorn looked at me with red eyes and said, "I'm sorry I hurt you." He nodded. I wanted to believe him. Some part of me did. But trust did not rise. It stayed low like a candle that refused to grow. The deed had already been done. The house was sold and all that was left was for us to move out. Where was he expecting me to end up after selling the only shelter we had? Did he care what will happen to me? The restaurant clock struck the hour. The sound made me jump a little. When we returned home, he touched the wall clock. The one that had followed my pain, my tears, my doubts. The time was a bit late. He opened it up to correct it. However, something mysterious happened at that very moment. The battery died in his hand. When he put it back, the second hand of the clock no longer moved. The silence that followed felt heavy, like a warning of changes coming. I stared at the quiet clock and felt a shiver deep in my chest. The night felt still, like the air was waiting for my breath. I sat on the floor beside the silent clock. The hands were frozen at 8:43. It felt strange to see it quiet after all the months it had chased my pain with its ticking. I placed my hand on my chest and whispered, "Lord, I don't know what happens next." Then I opened my Bible. The page fell on Jeremiah 29 verse 11, like the verse was waiting for me. "For I know the plans I have for you, saith the Lord, plans to give you hope and a future." The words warmed my heart. I let them fill every empty place inside me. I truly had hope once again. My future, which once looked bleak, was beginning to brighten up again. I closed my eyes and prayed, "Fight for me, God. I will not fight dirty." A quiet peace settled over me. It felt like a blanket placed gently over tired shoulders. I breathed deeper than I had in weeks. When I stood up, I looked at the clock again. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt like a sign that the old season was ending. I didn't know how God would move. I didn't know when. But I was done trying to force things with my own strength. I whispered, "Lead me, Lord." And for the first time in a long while, felt safe. Safety belongs to God. And one thing I was sure of is that I am His and He is mine. I belong to Him and He keeps His own safe. The week started like any other, but by Wednesday something shifted. Thorn came home early. His face looked pale, almost washed out. "What happened?" I asked. He sank into a chair. "My business partner, Usric," he pulled out. He said he didn't trust the numbers anymore. I stood still. Not in victory, not in pride. Just still. He rubbed his forehead. "I don't have money for rent next month." I felt a soft tug in my heart. Not anger. Not revenge. Just understanding. I sat across from him and said gently, "Thorn, let God guide you." He looked up at me like he wasn't sure how to accept kindness. Later that night, when he fell asleep on the couch, I whispered a prayer over him. "Lord, show him the path. Heal what pride has broken." I didn't know that God was also opening a door for me. Because the next day, Pastor Elwin called. "Aurelia, there's a small investment group that heard about your work in the women's business class. They want to meet you." My heart skipped. And that was how God stepped in gently, not with loud miracles but with quiet direction. And that was all I needed, for God to show me which way to turn to. The meeting with the investment group felt like walking into a sunrise. The three leaders, Lady Muriel, Sir Hawthorne, and young Mr. Fenrick, listened to every word I said. I showed them my plan, a small home supply shop with fair prices for families in need. They loved it. Lady Muriel leaned forward. "Aurelia, you have vision. And we support people who rise after being pushed down." My eyes warmed. "Thank you." Within a week they funded me. Felt unreal. Like God had taken the broken pieces of my life and arranged them into something strong. I walked home with the contract in my hand. The wind felt soft on my face. I whispered, "Thank you, Lord." When I told Thorn, his mouth fell open a little. Not in jealousy, just surprise. "You're starting a business?" "Yes," I said. "And I'll be rebuilding my life too." He nodded slowly. Something humbled him. That night I sat with my Bible again. I opened to Jeremiah 29 verse 11 and smiled. Hope was rising. And God was leading me. 2 months later, the house keys jingled in my hand. They were silver, shiny, and new. The home wasn't big, but it was bright and safe. White curtains, a warm kitchen, a soft rug under my feet, and a new wall clock that ticked gently. Not loud, not harsh, just steady. I felt tears rise, but they were the good kind. Thorn stood at the doorway. "Aurelia, can I stay here? Just for a while?" I looked at him kindly but firmly. "You may visit. You may heal. But you will not live here until trust is rebuilt." I needed to set my boundaries this time, not for revenge, but to keep myself from being hurt over and over again. He nodded slowly. "I understand." And for the first time I believed he did. I prayed over every room that night. "Lord, let this be a home of peace." And the peace settled in like a soft light. Months passed. Thorn found steady work with a small building firm. He grew quieter, softer, more careful with his words. Life had taught him the hard way. He had used his own hands to throw away the things that God had given him, the house and I in particular. We can only keep what we value. One afternoon he came to visit. He stood on my porch and said, "Thank you for not destroying me when you could have." He nodded. Mercy is not weakness. It's God's way. God loved us when we were yet sinners. As His children we must follow His footsteps. We sat on my small sofa and had Bible study together. When God says He will help you, He means every word of it. He is not a man that He should lie. He keeps His word. He said He would help me and He has. The new clock ticked behind us. Soft, gentle, calm. I forgave him, slowly, safely, with boundaries. Not because he earned it, but because God rebuilt me. He has become a better gentleman, more caring and kinder with his words. When he left that evening to the shelter where he stayed, I closed the door, leaned against it, and breathed deeply. Thank you, Lord, for helping me, for your plans for me which keeps unfolding with every passing day, and most especially for this roof over my head. That has remained my prayers, and for that I remain ever grateful to God. The clock ticked on. Strong. Steady. I whispered the truth that carried me out of the storm. When God rebuilds you, no one gets to break you again. And this time, I believed every word.